Scratch the coffin's door to the haunted void deep beneath the ground.
Hello. Hi. How you doing? I'm doing great, thanks for asking. Welcome back to the disturbing movie Iceberg. Now, if you remember a couple years ago, I already did a video similar to this. You can no longer find that video or the channel associated with it because of, you just can't find it anymore. Being that that was one of my most popular videos on that channel, and this being one of the most requested videos to redo on this channel, I'm going to redo the video. However, there's a catch here, because when I was doing research for it, I realized, holy shit, there's another iceberg here. Like a completely new iceberg, different from the one that I covered a couple years ago. It's the same exact iceberg as far as how it's structured. However, they moved some movies around to different tiers. They put new movies on, they took movies off. So kind of, not really, this is the same iceberg, and kind of not really, this is a completely different iceberg, somewhere in the middle. So what we're going to do, like we did last time, is we're going to go through every single movie, and I'm going to give you a summary of what that movie is about. Every single movie from tier 3 to tier 8. The reason I say tier 3 to tier 8 and not from tier 1 to tier 8 is because tiers 1 and 2 are just your standard horror movies, where if you are a fan of the genre, you more than likely have seen this movie. Like, for example, from tier 1, The Ring, Conjuring, Insidious, Scream. And then tier 2, A Nightmare on Elm Street, The House That Jack Built, A Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Plague Dogs, Megan is Missing. If you're a fan of the genre, you more than likely have seen those films. If not, go give them a watch because they're fantastic films. But from tier 3 to tier 8, that is where the movies that are very obscure, movies that are classified as extreme horror, the movies where you kind of only hear about them in passing and you don't really dig into them. So I dug into them for you. If you're unfamiliar with how an iceberg works, let me walk you through this real quick. So tiers 1 and 2 are the tip of the iceberg, right? They're things that people see when they pass by. People are familiar with them. That's why they're the tip of the iceberg. The further down the iceberg you go, the less and less known the movies become. And in this case, the more and more sinister and evil and disgusting the movies become. And you'll start to pick up on the fact that the further down the iceberg you go, you start to realize that these movies just kind of lose all sense of a plot. There's no setting. It's just kind of violence for violence sake, disgustingness for disgustingness sake, or just shock value, shockumentary for shock value and shockumentary's sake. They're just there to be what they are, which is fucking disgusting and fucked up and weird. That's all it is. Now that all that fucking bullshit is out of the way, let's move on to actually describing the movies in the disturbing movie Iceberg. The first movie is called Salo, or 120 Days of Sodom. This is one of the more famous movies on this list for just being a straight up what the fuck movie. It's up there with a Serbian film, and it's not really a surprise that a Serbian film and Salo, or 120 Days of Sodom are on the exact same tier. I'm trying not to fuck this up, but if I do, please forgive me. Salo, or 120 Days of Sodom, is basically the final 120 days of World War II when Mussolini was ruling Italy. So there was 4 very wealthy I'm having a stroke. 4 extremely wealthy people who kidnap 18 people, 9 of them being teenage boys, 9 of them being teenage girls. And for 120 days, they are subjected to torture and sexual abuse in ways. There's a lot of sodomy in this movie. There's a lot of rape in this movie. There's a lot of scat in this movie, like eating poop. If you've been watching me for a while, then you know that I have a problem with puke or poop. I can't handle it, and this iceberg has a shitload of it. So god damn it, this entire movie kind of captures basically how sadistic the last 120 days of Mussolini's rule were in Italy, because they knew they were get fucked up. So they're like, we're gonna go out with a bang, and they just started fucking raping people left and right and just kidnapping teenagers and stuff like this. I don't want to say this happened, but things like this definitely did happen, you know what I'm saying? And then the final scene is just like people being quartered, hung, branded, like with an iron up the fucking rectum of a dude, and then it cuts to 2 soldiers who are slow dancing to a waltz, and then some dude kills himself. The movie's wild. It's very wild. We're gonna move on now. Happiness is the name of the next movie. And this movie is anything but happiness. It's very unhappiness, sadness, people would say. So this movie is cut up into like 4 different segments from 4 different people's lives, and this movie is all about normal people, but the dark side of some normal people. For example, there's a man named Bill who has an 11-year-old son. His 11-year-old son has a friend who comes over for a sleepover. Bill is obsessed with this kid for some reason, so he drugs him and then he rapes the 11-year-old boy. And then he finds out there's another 11-year-old boy from his son's school who is home alone. So he goes to the house under the pretense of a parent-teacher conference, and then he sexually assaults that kid too. And then when he's caught, his son is like, "Would you do that to me?" And Bill looks at him and says, "No, I would just beat my dick instead." That's just one of the 4 segments in this movie. I don't want to go into any more, but basically this movie is called happiness. It is very not happiness. It is the opposite of happiness. The next movie is called Suicide Club. Now this movie is a Japanese movie, and the more you dig into the disturbing movie Iceberg, you realize, holy shit, this entire thing is dominated by the Japanese. What the fuck is going on? Suicide Club is about a club in Japan who is primarily made up of high schoolers, and what they do is they fucking kill themselves. Like, for example, in the movie, 54 of them jump in front of a moving train. 4 of them jump off of a school roof. One of them being the girlfriend of one of the dudes they landed on, which is a wild thing to see in a movie. Now, like I said, this is based on true events because this actually happened in Japan. People were throwing themselves into a volcano in Japan, if I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken. Please tell me I'm not mistaken. People would go to a mountain and jump into a volcano in Japan. Please tell me I'm not wrong there. The next movie is Terrifier, like Art the Clown Terrifier. So in the first movie, which is what's referenced here, Art is stalking a babysitter and the 2 babies she's sitting on. How do you explain what a babysitter is? I don't fucking know. And the reason Terrifier is on here is because of the amount of gore that is in Terrifier. But Terrifier is more on like the not taking itself seriously thing at all, which is why Terrifier is one of my favorite franchises of all time, not even just in horror, just in general. I love Terrifier. Terrifier 3 just came out 8 days ago, and I won't even lie, like that movie was like, it was fucked. I am so surprised that it was in theaters. But at the same time, you could tell that it's not taking itself seriously at all, which is why, personally, I don't think it should be on the Iceberg, but I don't see an argument to why it shouldn't be on the Iceberg. Like, all that to say, I don't think it should be, but because it is, I totally get it. You get it? All right, moving on. Next movie is called Martyrs. Now, Martyrs is a lot of people's favorite horror movies because it's their first introduction into like the extreme horror genre, even though this is kind of on like the softer end of extreme horror, but yet it is still there because this shit is wild. The movie follows a girl named Lucy who was tortured as a child. So she escapes, and then she finds out that she found the people who held her captive and was torturing her, and she went to their house and murdered them. Went into the basement and found out, oh shit, they're just torturing a shitload of people, because she finds a girl down there in a catatonic state, just out of her fucking mind, and I believe she was skinned. Like, she was fucked up. Turns out they belong to like a cult, I would say, of people who torture people to the point of death, but not letting them die, but just enough to where they see the afterlife. And then they end up doing that to Lucy, who becomes the first person to actually push past that limit and see the afterlife by skinning her alive. So yeah, that's Martyrs in a nutshell. Pink Flamingos. Oh, what a fucking joy this one is. Pink Flamingo is about the whole walnut, the whole fucking bowl of pink flamingos is who is the most filthiest person alive. And there are technically three people up for that title. A trans woman named Divine, and a married couple. I fucking cannot let's look this up. The Marbles. Divine and the Marbles. They're a couple, and they're clashing to see who is the filthiest people alive. In this movie, The end of the movie, Divine eats a real piece of dog shit. Oh, fuck. Like an actual piece, like not a prop. Like just a neighborhood dog with a limp and a missing eye, just fucking going down, shits on the sidewalk, and Divine... You get what I'm trying to say. We're gonna fucking move on. There's a lot more things that happen in this movie, but basically it's just a bunch of filth. But then you also got like murder and gore, but not as much as the filth. Disgusting. We're moving. The next movie is the Poughkeepsie tapes, or the Poughkeepsie tapes. Poughkeepsie sounds a little silly, so I'm going to say the Poughkeepsie tapes. So the Poughkeepsie tapes, it's been a long time since I've seen this movie, so please excuse me if I'm wrong. It's a bunch of tapes that belonged to a serial killer named Edward Canner. Yep, Edward Canner. And it's just a bunch of tapes that belong to him. Of course it's fake, but it makes you think it's real. It's really kind of disturbing and fucked up. Like, I believe the first tape is him mutilating, torturing, raping, and eating an 8-year-old girl. If I'm remembering correctly, that was like the first thing you see in the movie, which is a wild way to open a movie. Then it just kind of delves deeper and deeper into like what he did. Of course, it's not real, but just the thought of it actually happening isn't more than enough to put it onto this list. So that's why it's here on the disturbing movie Iceberg. The next movie is Cannibal Holocaust, and Cannibal Holocaust is pretty significant in the horror genre just by itself for two reasons. The first reason is because Cannibal Holocaust is the very first found footage horror movie ever, or I would even go further and say the first found footage movie ever, like a movie made to look like it was found footage. It was the first one to ever do that. And the second one is that the director of this film was put on trial for murder because of what was displayed on these tapes, because like I said, it was the first found footage movie ever. So people thought when they watched this movie that people were actually being brutalized and tortured and murdered in front of them. So they fucking brought him in front of a court, and then they're like, did you kill him? And he's like, no. In fact, here they are, and brought the actors out, and that's how he was acquitted. But anyway, so Cannibal Holocaust is kind of weird to explain. It's a movie within a movie. So it's about how these explorers went into the jungle to find like another missing film crew. So they went in to go find them, found the tapes, brought it back, and then watched the tapes and found out that the filmmakers were just like brutalizing and torturing the natives to make it look like the natives were at war with each other. For example, they locked a bunch of natives in a hut, set it on fire, and then made it look like the other natives did that to them, and that's just the way that they lived. And then those filmmakers were like tortured and murdered. Like, it's very famous. On the cover of it, there is a woman with a stake going through her body and out of her mouth. That was what one of the natives did to them. It's a very brutal movie because it was the first of its kind. It's very, very synonymous with disgusting horror, weird films, which is why it's on this list. And also because of the whole, hey, you murdered somebody. No, I didn't. That whole thing. That's why it's here. So Golden Glove is a German movie about a man named Fritz who is drunk, and he rapes, murders, mutilates women, and then he goes back to a bar because he's like drunk all the time. It's about alcoholism and like slow descent into like just craving alcohol and sex all the time. It's a very tough movie to try and explain without watching it. It's more on the artsy side, but there is a plot there, although it's very thin. That's basically what it is. It's just a drunk man named Fritz. Shoujo Tsubaki is a film that is very infamous, and why it's infamous is because it's a Japanese film that is banned in Japan. You know how fucking fucked your movie has to be banned in Japan? That is wild. And that's because the entire movie revolves around a girl, like an 8-year-old or 12-year-old girl, like a very young girl, who joins like a circus, like a freak show, and she is like sexually abused. She has like weird magic powers. The entire movie is kind of weird and just kind of overall artsy for a reason. The creator of Shoujo Tsubaki, the movie, couldn't find funding to make this movie. So what he did was he drew the entire movie onto a paper I think 9,000 sheets of paper, and then he did this whole thing. I can't even do it. That's how fucking bad I am. This thing where you roll it, that's how he made the movie, which is wild. And I don't believe that you can get it anywhere. I mean, you can definitely see edited versions, but the original, I believe, you cannot find. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am, and I'm very confident. If you find it, no you didn't. Fuck you. So Vase de Noches is the only movie on the disturbing movie Iceberg that I would say is in a higher tier than it should be. This movie should be like towards the bottom. This should not be here on tier 3, because Vase de Noches is also known as the pig fucking movie, because it's about a dude who fucks pigs. I'm not making that up. Here, look at the fucking screenshot. So this movie is about a man who falls in love with a sow, rolls around in shit with the sow, and then rapes the sow. The sow then has piglets. The sow pays more attention to the piglets. The man gets upset. So what does he do? He kills the piglets and then hangs them outside of the barn. The sow finds the piglets, is extremely distressed, runs around, runs down into a ditch, drowns. The man finds the sow, is so distraught, goes to the barn and hangs himself, and that's the movie. That is pretty fucking accurate, and I am not exaggerating any part of that. That is what happens in that movie. What the fuck? This movie does not deserve to be in tier 3. This at least needs, I would say, 4. The next movie is a movie called Ken Park, and I wish I could tell you what this movie means. Unfortunately, I'm not a psychologist, nor am I utterly fucking insane, so I don't know. Ken Park is a movie that's a movie. The movie opens up and this dude rides up to a skate park, puts down a camcorder, smiles at it, and then just fucking shoots himself in the head. Like, that's the first like 5 minutes of this fucking movie. There's like 4 different plots in this movie. The first one revolves around a kid who is fucking his girlfriend's mom while saying like, oh, well, I'm fucking your daughter, I'm wishing it was you. And the mom's like, ah, ha, ha, ha. What the fuck is this? The second is about a girl who has a very religious father, and while she was having the deed done with her boyfriend, who she tied up to the bed, the dad catches them, abuses the fuck, like almost murders the kid, the boy, and then forces his daughter to have a quasi-incestuous relationship with him, a marriage. What did I just say? What did I just say? What did I just say? I'll just repeat it. The father forces his daughter to marry him. The third subplot is about a kid who has an alcoholic, abusive stepfather. And the alcoholic, abusive stepfather comes home one day and tries to suck on his peen. Okay? And the kid runs away, which is what you should do when that happens. I'm going to move on from that subject because I'm getting very uncomfortable right now. Fourth one is about a kid who is into asphyxiation. So you see him kind of doing this whole thing while he's choking himself watching a woman play tennis, which is out of this fucking world. What the fuck is that? Goes downstairs, murders both of his grandparents, finds out he likes it, puts a camcorder up, says why he did it, puts his grandpa's dentures in his mouth, lays on his bed, and then just waits for the cops. And then the movie ends by 3 of the 4 people, not counting the guy who I just talked about, who just, you know, got caught by the cops, going to the skate park and having a threesome. I don't think Neil deGrasse Tyson himself could decipher what the fuck is that. So we're gonna move on. Yes, a Serbian film, one of the most infamous movies ever created. A Serbian film is about a ex-Serbian porn star named Milo, who would do anything to support his family. And one thing leads to another, and then he finds out that he was drugged. And then he decapitates women, and then found out that he, I'm not gonna say the sentence, those 2 words, in the same sentence, so I'm going to say it like this. R words his 9-year-old son while he was high on drugs, while his brother R worded his wife right next to him, because the people who were recording him, the company he was working for, were not into porn. They were into snuff porn. And then they go home, all three of them, and then Milo kills all of them, and then himself, well, at the same time, he shoots all three of them through her back. And then a camera crew comes in and says, start with the little one. And then a dude is unbuckling his pants, inferring that they're going to have intercourse with the corpses. That is what a Serbian film is, in the most vanilla way that I could put it, without diving way too deep into it. Do you want to say hi?
Hello.
I married a monster because we were watching Terrifier 3 in the theaters, and I look over, and she's like half asleep. What the fuck? What's going on there, pal? Are you okay? An interesting thing to note about a Serbian film, and it's also something that will happen later on down in the tiers, is there is kind of like a conspiracy or a discussion to be had about how producing and directing porn movies will eventually lead you to producing and directing snuff films. Not sure how they correlate. I guess it's because of just the raw human emotion and the raw human factors that go into the type of film that you're making. But I noticed that that is what happens in a lot of these films, is that a lot of them devolve from porn into straight snuff. The next movie is called Antichrist, and this one has the biggest actor thus far with Willem Dafoe, aka the Green Goblin, aka the GOAT. Fucking love Willem Dafoe. So Antichrist is one of my favorite films because of just the cinematography and how artsy it is. If you know anything about me, you know that I love cinematography and film. But the first 10 minutes of this film is just like, dude, what the fuck is this? Because this movie has full penetration in it, which automatically qualifies it for an X rating, like an X-rated film. But they got around that by releasing it as an unrated film, which I guess, but like, holy shit. Also, while they're having passionate love made in the shower, their 10-year-old son falls out of their second-story window and fucking dies. And the wife is so distraught that Willem Dafoe rents a cabin, and they have like weird intercourse that's like kind of delving into BDSM, but more on like masochism and sadomasochism, like very weird shit involved in the intercourse. It's called Antichrist for a reason. The next one is called Gyo. Now, interesting thing about this is that I couldn't find anything on this film. I lied. I found 2 things on this film. The first one is a movie about a fish attack, which I don't think it is at all. And the second one is Junji Ito. And Junji Ito is a really good horror manga artist, but I don't think he makes anything that would be in this realm. You know what I mean? I mean, he makes some fucked up shit, but I don't think it belongs in the tier list, so I didn't dig any further. So if there's something else in there that I missed, sorry, moving on. The next film is called Engineering Red, and from all of my research that I've done, there is no subtitles for this film because this film is Russian. So if you don't speak Russian, you're kind of shit out of luck. I could be wrong again. There could be some obscure fucking website that you can see it and it has subtitles in every language, including Sumerian. Like, I don't fucking know, but from what I've seen, there is no subtitles for this movie. So not many things are known about it in the English language. But what is known is that the director of this film made this film literally just to fucking make people throw up. Because in an interview, he said that while this film premiered, 2 or 3 people threw up and that made him happy, which is fucking wild. That's a wild thing to do as a director. Be like, yeah, dumbass, go home, pussy. For example, I'm gonna read here what happens in the movie, like during one part. Myriad surgical procedures involving hands and feet being stitched up, a rod inserted into the leg, the surgical separation of a pair of Siamese babies, and just when you're getting all used to the grotesque images, a mass of flesh and skin is pulled down to reveal it actually to be a woman's neck. Microscopic life seemingly up to no good. What the fuck does that even mean? The next movie is Tetsuo the Iron Man. So Tetsuo was a man that worked at a machine shop and he got cut by a piece of fucking metal, and then out of that grew metal out of his cut. And while he's having doing the deed with his wife, his dick turns into a fucking drill. Dude, this whole movie is just wild because it's basically about Tetsuo turning into metal. That's the whole thing. And then there's another dude who is also being turned into metal, and then at the end they fucking fight, and then they realize we shouldn't be fighting, we should be trying to make this entire world metal, and then they fly off into the sunset. That I don't know how else to explain this movie to you. It's Japanese. I think that should sum it up pretty well for you. The next movie is a film called Come and See. This movie is an anti-war film about World War II and the Nazis. It basically highlights the atrocities of the Nazis and what they did. Similar to how All Quiet on the Western Front was an extremely anti-war movie showing you the realities of what it's like to be a trench soldier in World War II. Or was it World War One? Doesn't matter either way. But in Come and See, it's just showing you the harsh realities of being a citizen during World War II and having the Nazis come by and just fuck your shit up. Like, for example, it follows a kid who goes away from home, and when he tries to come back, finds out that the Nazis came through and murdered their entire town. And like, he finds his mom and dad's remains like in a pile of bodies. And then there is a woman with a baby, and then the Nazis take the baby, throw it in the back of the church, and then just fucking start gang R-wording the girl. And then she comes out with like amnesia, like she doesn't remember anything, like Casca from Berserk. Like Casca from Berserk. It's a very anti-war movie. Yeah, that's all I can say about that. The next one is called Green Inferno. Now I'm going to save some time here and say that the Green Inferno is a remake of Cannibal Holocaust, just with a little bit more creativity, but it's basically the same thing. The final movie in tier number 3 is a film called I Spit on Your Grave. Now I have a funny story about this because I saw this movie when I was like fucking 6, because my auntie had it in like a DVD collection, and I've loved movies since I was super young, so I watched every single movie in there, and I remember watching I Spit on Your Grave. So this is probably my first extreme horror film that I've ever seen, and I still love it to this day. So I Spit on Your Grave at its core is a rape and revenge movie. It's about a reporter, I believe it was, who gets gang raped by 4 people, and she basically seeks them out and like kills them one by one. What makes this movie so controversial is because of the length of the gang rape scenes. In total, these scenes were on screen for 30 fucking minutes of its runtime. 30 minutes of just gang rape. Dude, that's a lot. There's also 3 different I Spit on Your Graves. There's I Spit on Your Grave, I Spit on Your Grave 2, and I Spit on Your Grave 3, Vengeance is Mine. And then I believe there was a remake that was released like 5 years ago. I've only ever seen the first one, so I don't know about the other ones, but that one has a special place in my heart because I saw it when I was such a wee boy. In tier 4, there are 3 different movies that I'm going to combine into one subtle explanation for one reason and one reason only. It's because it's part of a trilogy made by the same exact person that follows kind of the same storyline. That trilogy is known as the Vomit Gore Trilogy. The 3 movies that make up the Vomit Gore Trilogy by Lucifer Valentine: Regurgitated Sacrifice, Slaughtered Vomit Dolls, and Slow Torture puke chamber. If you remember, puke is not my thing. So slow torture puke chambers follows around a prostitute in a motel where she is hallucinating. Like, she has a drug-induced hallucination where she is like hallucinating these demonic entities around her that are making her do things. Oh, fuck. There's a lot of puke, obviously. A lot of puke. Okay, a lot of puking in the cups and drinking. Other people doing it and downing it like a fucking shot at a bar. Wild shit. And then she dies. And that goes into regurgitated sacrifice. Regurgitated sacrifice follows the same prostitute, but she wakes up and she's in hell. And now there are two succubi who are cutting her open and like throwing up in her mouth and fucking like taking her intestines and like eating it in front of her and making her eating it. Wild shit. And then Slaughtered Vomit Dolls follows pretty much the same thing. You get it. It's all about puke and it's all about gore. We're gonna move on now, for my fucking sake. Also, before I move on, the main actress of the Vomit Gore trilogy was murdered, like in real life, and with her friend. So rest in peace. I don't like the movies, obviously, but like that's a woman that did exist and then she was murdered. So rest in peace. We're gonna move on. Life and Death of a Porno Gang was made in Serbia, so a lot of people compare it to a Serbian film, but they say there's a lot less gore and a lot more sex, which makes no fucking sense because all Serbian film was fucking gore. I mean, okay, yeah, now that I think about it, I get it. And exactly like what I said with the Serbian film, it's about porn going into snuff films because this porn producer wasn't getting the same feeling. Like, he wasn't getting enough achievement out of making porn. So he moved on to making snuff films. So again, more of the from porn to snuff kind of track that we were talking about earlier. Same thing that goes on with this. It's basically a Serbian film, but less gore and more porn. You get it? Okay, moving on. So Viva la Muerte is a weird art house kind of film. It's about a boy whose father was captured by fascists because the mom accused him of being a communist. So he's like trying to find his dad, but the entire time he's looking for his father, he's imagining what the fascists are doing to his father because he's a communist. So it's not really reality. Everything disturbing in that movie, in fact, the entire movie takes place inside of the kid's head. And I didn't have enough room to write down things he was imagining, but I did save it, so let me read some of it. There is no real plot, just a series of images that play on the mindless cruelty of fascism and the Catholic Church. A man is buried up to his neck in the sand, and his protruding head is then kicked in by hooves of an onrushing horse. Hot needles are shoved into the eyeballs and eyes devoured like kebabs. An aunt bears her back and begs the youthful hero to whip her for the sake of his late grandfather's eternal salvation. A priest shoves the hero's finger into a fire as a minor punishment. A homosexual survives a firing squad execution only to be dispatched with a handgun fired up the anus. A priest is castrated and forced to eat his own testicles, all while praising the Lord for such a gift. A wife shits on the head of a husband she betrayed to the gallows as he waits to be hung. So Snuff 102 is about a reporter who is investigating snuff films. And it's called Snuff 102 because she is the 102nd victim of this particular guy who is making these snuff films. And like 3/4 of this movie is just this dude being a fucking asshole. I don't know how else to say it. In the span of 5 minutes, here's what he did to one of his victims, nicknamed Snuff 100. Groped, stomped her stomach, bit off one of her nipples, mutilated her genitals with a chef's knife, while going over to Snuff 102, the reporter, going up to her and shoving the knife into her mouth and just kind of fucking, you know, doing that whole thing. I guess the reason why it's not in the next tier is because there is some sort of a plot, but the entire like 3/4 of the movie is just straight torture. So I guess, but no. The next movie is Melancholy der Engel. Melancholy der Engel. So this movie is about religion and how it relates to nihilism, because this movie opens up with this baby being born and then the baby being taken away by robed figures and immediately decapitated. Immediately. Immediately. Like, it was fucking, what the fuck? The rest of the movie has barely any plot. It's more of like just shock value for shock value's sake, like I said in the beginning of the video. But it's about these girls who are coming to grasp with their nihilistic ways. Like, for example, there was a point in the movie where the two girls who are nihilists try to explain to two other girls that what nihilism is by taking a knife and cutting off or cutting up one of the girl's breasts, and the other girl is like vomiting semen. I don't know where that shit even came from, but that's what happens in the movie. And when I say this next part, I'm not trying to dog on this movie. I'm just saying it as it's being presented to me, and just as just the words that I choose to describe it as. There's a part in this movie that is very sacrilegious and blasphemous to like Christian Catholic beliefs, because there is a nun that is also nihilist and she like kind of masturbates on film. So it's very off-putting, which I like. Movies like this are designed to do things like that. So I thought it was kind of, it's very cool, but a lot of people, if you plan on watching some of these movies and you are very like kind of religious, I would stay away from this one just because of that. All the other movies I don't think are like that, but this one kind of just took me by surprise. It was really out of left field. So just a little warning for you guys. I'm religious. I still loved that part because it kind of just threw me for a loop. I was like, what the fuck? But just for a warning for those of you who are very uncomfortable with that kind of things. First of all, why are you watching these kinds of movies? But just in case you are one of those like me, just know that that's in there. This movie is none other than my all-time favorite shit fucking disgusting horror movie, Necromantic. I have the collector's version of this movie because I love it so much. I love this movie just because of how fucking shitty it is. Necromantic is about, it's a movie about necrophilia. It's about a man whose job is to clean up crime scenes, and he brings home a corpse for his girlfriend and him to play with. And there is a very long scene of like fucking 10 minutes of them going to town on this corpse. Like, she puts a rod or a broomstick handle in the pelvis with a condom on it and proceeds to fuck this thing. And like, he takes the eyeball out of it and like swirls it around in his mouth and spits it back in his socket. Dude, it was so fucking gross. And then she realizes that she likes the corpse more than she likes him. So she steals the corpse off the wall and leaves him, causing him to go into like a depressive state and like stabs himself, and then he starts ejaculating blood all over himself because they get off on death. You get it? And it shows everything. It shows him like his thing and it ejaculating and him stabbing himself over and over. It's a German movie, if that helps at all. Makes sense of what the shit this is. But also, while this is happening, there is a video of a man killing a rabbit and skinning it and gutting it, and it's a real rabbit. Like this was not a prop. Like, it was an actual farmer killing and skinning and eating a rabbit. So if you're sensitive to that kind of things, I would stay away. Other than that, this is one of my favorite movies. And also, the ending of this movie, I think, is one of the most, it's the best ending to any movie I've ever seen, because it zooms in on the dude's grave, right? It like pans through a graveyard, ends up on the dude's grave, a freshly buried grave, and then a shovel hits and it's a high heel, indicating that his girlfriend is gonna go back for his dead body because she still loved him in a way. It's the best ending to this movie could have possibly ever had. So good. So good. Okay, holy shit, so good. It's not good. This movie's not good, but it's good. Does that make sense? The next movie is Black Metal Veins, and this movie was made by the same person who made the Vomit Gore trilogy, Lucifer Valentine. But this movie is drastically different because it's a documentary following around 5 people who are addicted to heroin, and it follows around their day-to-day life. But reading the Reddit, like a subreddit discussing this film, there was an actual heroin addict who watched the film and said that it's not realistic at all, and a lot of it was kind of, I guess, set up and planned. The drug use is very real in this film, but just what they did and what happened, because in the film one of them dies, that was staged more than likely. But there was another documentary that I don't remember the name, I'm sorry, I didn't write it down, that is way more realistic, and it's on HBO. But this movie at its core is a documentary about drug addiction and loss and all that kind of stuff, and what comes with being an addiction or having an addiction to drugs. Where the Dead Go to Die. This movie, Where the Dead Go to Die, has PlayStation 1 graphics. It's not live action. But this movie is split up into 3 different parts. It doesn't matter what the parts are, because this entire movie is shit. And I'm not saying that like, oh, it's bad, you wouldn't like it. I'm saying like, no, it's shit. This movie is fucking shit. So this movie is controversial because of its depiction of production of child pornography, molestation of children, and rape of children, and also promising of bringing back 2 dead parents in exchange for a child's virginity. That's where the dead go to die. And it's called Where the Dead Go to Die because the parents are dead. It's not a good movie. It's not even like good for like a shock movie. This is just a bad movie all around. So if you want to watch this movie, you're fucking weird. I don't know what else to say. Gummo. The last movie in tier 4 is a movie called Gummo. So Gummo is a movie that if you like cats, you should stay away from this movie, because the entire like subplot, there's more around it, but like there is an uncomfortable amount of hunting and killing cats in this movie, like because it revolves around like 15-year-old boys who kill cats. Like they run and shoot cats with air guns, and then there's like murder and gore. This film is very, it focuses a lot on animal abuse, drug abuse, sexual abuse, alcoholism, racism, sexism. There's a lot of different points in this movie, but it is vastly overshadowed by how much animal abuse is in this movie. I couldn't tell if it was real or not, but it's there. And I have a cat. I love cats. I love dogs. I just love animals. So I'm not trying to watch that shit. So if you watch it, let me know how it was. And did you cry? Because I would have. Moving on. We're moving on into tier number 5 of the disturbing movie Iceberg. Now, this is where things get blended together a little bit, because this is where movies start having no plot, and it's just a thing that's happening on screen, and that's the entire movie. A lot of these movies are like maximum 1 hour long, just torture flicks. That's all this is, torture flicks. For example, Guinea Pig. Guinea Pig is a Japanese film about torture. That's all it is. It's just this woman getting fucking brutally mutilated and tortured. And there is another movie called American Guinea Pig, which is the exact same thing, except it's American and not Japanese. The one thing about Guinea Pig is that there are multiple installments in the Guinea Pig franchise. Yes, it is a franchise of movies. The third one is called Guinea Pig, Flowers of Flesh and Blood. This movie is synonymous with urban legends. You wanna know why? Because Charlie Sheen somehow got his fucking hands on this movie. Yes, Charlie Sheen of 2.5 Men. That fucking Charlie Sheen got his hands on this movie, watched it, completely convinced himself that this is real, and got the FBI involved in investigating this movie. And then they were like, dude, this is just a fucking movie. And the director's like, dude, this is a movie. And Charlie Sheen's like, oh, my bad. So that's why this movie is kind of infamous, because of that. But yeah, that's all it is. It's just this woman getting tortured. I'm sure there's a subplot in there somewhere, but does anybody really watch Guinea Pig for the fucking plot? I didn't think so. The next movie on this tier is a movie called Juvenile Crime. Now, this is one of the only movies from tier 4 down that have any semblance of a plot. And that's because Juvenile Crime is a based on true events movie. This movie follows the crime of Junko Furuta and how she was kidnapped, mutilated, tortured, and murdered at the age of 17 in Japan. This was a real case. This actually happened. So Junko Furuta was a 17-year-old girl who was kidnapped by 4 other teenage boys, held captive for 44 days while they dehydrated her, starved her, put cigarettes out on her skin, fucking crushed her with hammers, beat the shit out of her, raped her, just the most vile, inhumane things you could do to somebody they did to Junko, and held her captive for 44 days. And the parents knew about it but didn't do anything about it the whole time. And then she died because her brain had gotten so small. I forgot. No, she died, and then after her autopsy happened, they found out that her brain had shrunk to the size, like, I think to 3/4 of the size that it was normally. They fucking destroyed Junko Furuta, and that's what Juvenile Crime is. It is a retelling of that story. It's a very sad story. RIP to Junko Furuta, because the first time I read about it, it was fucking heartbreaking. So yeah, that's what Juvenile Crime is. It's a movie following the case of Junko Furuta. Tumbling Doll of Flesh is the next movie in this tier, and it still follows the same track that we were talking about how porn slowly devolves into snuff, because the entire movie revolves around a girl named Kana and a dude named Kiku. And Kana and Kiku agreed to do a porn with this specific producer director. As the shoot progresses, so as the filming and the shoot progresses, it gets more and more uncomfortable for her. Like, they start incorporating things like bondage, BDSM, melted wax play, flogging, which is like whipping people. So she decides to try and leave. And then Kiku and the director knock her out, tie her to the bed, and mutilate her, and keep filming this film on her. And it ends up with them ripping her open and Kiku going to town on her guts, and then finishing in, like, literally in her guts, like in her intestines. And then the director, like, stabbing Kiku, or hitting Kiku in the head with a knife, and then stabbing Kana in the face with a knife. And then the movie fucking ends. Like I said, this movie doesn't have a plot, except for that little tiny bit of plot that take course over 72 minutes. It's a 72-minute movie of that. The next movie is a movie that I have done multiple videos on and multiple hours of research into just this specific movie. It is called Philosophy of a Knife. Now, it wasn't really the movie that I did research on, it's what it's based off of. Because Philosophy of a Knife is based off of Unit 731 from World War II Imperial Japan. If you're not aware, Unit 731 was a top secret Imperial Japan, like, chemical and biological warfare experimentation, like, unit in Japan. And they did things like freeze arms of, like, people with liquid nitrogen and slam them with hammers to see what would happen. They would cut open women, pregnant women, and, like, take the baby out, cut the arm off of the baby, implant another baby's arm onto that arm, and put it back in and sew it up without anesthesia, by the way, no painkillers, to see if the baby would be born normally, if the baby would take the arm, right? They would also do things like take 5,000 fleas, put them into ceramic pots, and these fleas had, like, the bubonic plague, and they would fly over places in China and drop these fleas, these ceramic pots of fleas, drop them into towns and see how fast the plague would spread, just to see how fast, like, fleas spread, also how fast disease spreads. They did that with anthrax, they did that with bubonic plague. They also did that with, I believe, smallpox, but without the fleas. They did it with clothes, like the blankets that I think the Americans did with the Native Americans. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's also a thing that they did. This movie basically documents everything that they did, almost everything that they did. It just basically, this movie, Philosophy of a Knife, basically is a short documentary, even though it's not a short movie, but you can't expect to cover everything Unit 731 did in a documentary. But it's a short documentary of what Unit 731 did during its time of active use in World War II. Did that make sense? I fucking hope it did, because that was very important. We're moving on though. The Gateway Meet. The Gateway Meet is about a bunch of Satanists that try to open a gateway to hell using violence in a town. The reason that this movie is so far down on the list is because of the amount of gore and how fucked up this movie is. And also there was a 3-year-old child on set the entire time, because it was the director's son or daughter. Don't remember what. I remember reading something on Reddit of the actual kid that was on the movie, like saying like, yeah, that was me, but it's the internet. Anybody could say that. I could go on there and say that. But basically there was a kid like 3 to 6 years old being made to like lick blood out of a bathtub, right? Because it's evil. In reality, it was red dye, but still, anyway. Again, more violence for violence sake, with a subplot of trying to open up a gateway to hell. That's it. The next movie is Concrete, and that is also another movie that details the crimes of Junko Furata. But this one, I think instead of it's being Junko, it's Misaki. I believe it's the same story, but with different people in it, like they change the names around, stuff like that. And then they change how it ends, I believe. But it's basically the same thing. Woman's Flesh, My Red Guts is a movie about grief, because it's a movie about a man and a woman. Man leaves woman. Woman sad. Woman take toothbrush and mutilate her mouth with toothbrush out of grief. Woman find out she really liked that. Woman does other things to herself, like take razor blades to carve the Joker smile into herself and cut her guts open and have it leak all over the floor. Woman satisfied now. That's that movie. Self-mutilation because of grief. The next movie is called The Necrophiles, and I literally wrote down, read the thing. And that's because everyone ever that has ever seen this movie fucking loves this movie. Not because of like they're weird, it's because it's literally just dog shit. Like look at that. That is the fucking cover for The Necrophiles, and I'm going to read you what the summary of this movie is. A cannibal rapist rises from the grave as a flesh-eating zombie sex maniac. 2 Seattle cops, a satanic cult, and a flying demon fetus try to stop the lust-crazed ghoul before he can kill again. Everyone loves this movie because of how fucking dog shit it is. Like it's so fucking out of this world dumb. It's so fucking just silly that everyone loves it. So I might give this a watch, but it's down here, so I don't know. But I might give this a watch because everyone who's seen it has loved it so far. So I might be the first to hate it. Who knows? Not me, because I've never seen it. Moving on. Girl Hell 99 is about a girl named Misaki who lives, I guess, in an alternate reality. There is nothing saying that she does and nothing that says that she doesn't. But the way that they filmed this movie is like decrepit buildings, gray paint buildings, weeded areas, like just it looks really run down, and there is like just wild shit happening in this movie that would not fly in today's society. So I'm gonna go off on a limb and just use my third fucking eye, my fucking Hada Herda guy from fucking Love Guru, and I'm gonna say that this is not the reality that we live in, because in the first 5 minutes of the movie, she walks into her house. Misaki walks into her house. She has a sister that is completely disabled and has verbal issues, and the father is R-wording the daughter. First 5 minutes of this fucking movie. And then there's a dialogue between two dudes, who's one dude's like, oh, I really want to find a girlfriend. And the second dude's like, dude, we should just keep R-wording them. That's what we've always been doing. And the dude's like, oh, you're right. That's not something. It's a Japanese movie, so I guess I lived in Japan for 3 years. So first of all, shut the fuck up with the whole that's not what they're like. I know they're very polite. They're the most polite people I've ever met. There's also a point in this movie where the father drinks the disabled girl's piss. Ostermontag is the next movie. Of course, it's German. It could be, it's what if it's like not even German? What if it's like Mandarin or something? Oh my god. This is the best way I could sum this movie up. It's about a dude who is obsessed and has a love interest with a girl. That girl has a sister. That dude has a thing for murdering people, so he takes the sister, he thinks, and just fucks her up. Like literally plays a game at one point with like, it's called Kick the Woman, where you run around the house and like in 20 seconds you have to see how much times you can run around the house and kick the woman and how many laps you can do. And then they take her downstairs and he slams her head into the stairs and stomps on it and it flattens out. And then he looks down at her leg and there's a tattoo that only his love interest has. So it turns out he didn't even kill the love interest. He didn't kill the love interest sister. He killed the love interest. And now he's sitting there bitching and complaining like, oh my god, I'm a piece of shit. Yeah. Yeah. We know that. We've been known that. Are you only now gathering that? Mai-chan's Daily Life is the final film in this tier. And this one is based off of a manga, also called Mai-chan's Daily Life. The movie is called Mai-chan's Daily Life, the movie. Who'da thunk? Mai-chan's Daily Life is about a girl named Mai who is immortal and she can also regenerate. So she works at like this house mansion thing as like a prostitute, I would say, except instead of like sexual things that they do, but they still do sexual things, they can do whatever they want to her, like mutilate, torture, just completely butcher Mai because she just regenerate because she can't die. That's basically the entire thing of Mai-chan's Daily Life. But what I thought was kind of like way more fucked up than that was that there was a girl, one of her friends named Sayurin, who didn't have any arms or legs and was completely mute, but she was also being used as like a slave, but she couldn't regenerate and she wasn't immortal, so she just fucking dies. I personally think that's way more fucked up than Mai-chan, because Mai-chan, I mean, she goes through it every single day, non-stop, never ending. But this, he has no arms and legs. That sucks. I lied. That was not the last one in this tier. I'm just stupid. The next movie is called The Taming of Rebecca. And this film is literally just porn. That's all it is. But it was made by a company that no longer exists called Avon Productions. And Avon Productions was very well known for its brutal porn. Like in The Taming of Rebecca, there was a, like the first scene was like, what is it called? Incest between Rebecca and her father. And then there's like scenes of like nipple piercing and stuff like that. It's really important to know that this is not like a movie that we know, not like a film. This was a porn. Like these things happened. Like they did this. Like it's wild, but it's just a porn nonetheless. Moving on. The last movie, the actual last movie in this tier is Eccentric Psycho Cinema, which is another Japanese movie thing, cinema thing. Like I said, the Japanese just overwhelmed this list. And there's 8 movies. There's 8 fucking movies in this thing. And it's all about bondage. It's a bondage thing. about like porn and gore, you know, but just like extreme sadomasochistic porn, BDSM porn, but fake at the same time, but still real. It's so hard to explain these kinds of movies. I'm sorry if I'm not making any goddamn sense. Moving on to the next tier of film. Now, these are what is known as Mondo films. Mondo films are depiction of actual death or violence. And that is different from like straight up mixtape films, which is tier number 8. This is coming at it from like an educational perspective. Like there was a reason these films were made, as per difference of tier 8, which was made just to be shocking. These were made for a purpose of some sort. So we're going to go into this, and the first one is called Faces of Gore. Faces of Gore is about like accidents, work accidents, suicides, car accidents, bike accidents, just like general gore and death in your everyday life that doesn't really include violence. This is similar to the movie Faces of Death, but it's way more gory. Africa Adido. I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong. Please forgive me. But Africa Adido is possibly one of the most racist films ever made, because the entire film is about violence in Africa that just so happened to have erupted after the white man left Africa after the industrial colonialism of the 1960s. Basically, this entire movie was saying that after the colonial era left in 1960, violence erupted in Africa. They basically took like Civil War footage and images from around Africa and tried to say that it happened in one area, all because the colonialism people left. It's a very racist movie. They tried to depict all Africans as just super fucking violent, hardcore gore people that have no fucking humanity in them, when in reality it was taken from places of civil unrest, of like civil war and shit. And then they try to like depict it as like a certain thing. You get it. Moving on. It's a very racist movie. The next movie is called Banned from TV. And you know when you're watching like Cops or like Donut Operator on YouTube, and like he shows like police shootings, but like it obviously blurs out like the people dying and the heads exploding, or like Bud Dwyer shooting himself on live TV, how it blurs that out. It's the same things, except in the movie it's not blurred out. It's things that happened on TV that are like not blurred. They're like not censored. That's why it's called Banned from TV, because it's things that would have happened on TV minus the censorship. I just said his name, so shout out Donut Operator. If you guys want to see body cam footage from police officers being broken down to an educational standpoint, go subscribe to Donut. The next film is called Traces of Death, where it has like a bunch of like death things, like Bud Dwyer's suicide, general work accidents, automobile accidents, just gore in general. But it's also accompanied by like death metal and grindcore. I'm a huge fan of death metal grindcore, like the super chuggy, disgusting sewage music. So seeing like Mortician and Meshuggah being featured in a movie like this was just kind of like, okay, yeah, that fits the bill right there, actually. The next movie is called Buried in the Sand. This movie is literally just an American dude making a movie to try and justify the United States intervening in the Middle East. Like with Saddam Hussein's thing and Operation Enduring Freedom and all that kind of shit. Like, because this entire movie is just basically the atrocities that were being committed by Saddam Hussein in the Middle East and in Iran and Iraq and Afghanistan and stuff like that, which basically, from his point of view, explains why the United States needed to go to the Middle East to intervene because of all the atrocities. The Dark Side of Porn. This is interesting because this was an actual TV show in the United Kingdom, I think in 2006. The first season was actually pretty tame. It was kind of just like like saying like how porn stars are lonely, sexually transmitted diseases in porn, and then it moves on into the second season, and the first episode was was called like delved into like sadomasochistic BDSM, and then into like snuff films, and then the final episode was about bestiality, like zoophilia, like fucking animals. Like that was the last episode. And then it never came back. Gee, wonder why. Faces of Death. This is by far the most popular film in Mondo films, because this is a film that depicts death in all ways. Like, there is an alligator killing a man in this movie. There is a man in a motorcycle accident that dies. The Holocaust, like films or pictures and shit from the Holocaust. There's sick and dying children in like impoverished areas around the world. It shows like really fucked up real stuff that's happening, and it's basically like, yeah, this is life in different parts of the world, and that's what this was made for. The next movie is called Orozco the Embalmer, and this is about Froilan Orozco, what's his last name, Duarte, on how he is one of the few embalmers in Colombia. What part of Colombia? Sorry, like I said, there's a lot of fucking words here. Bogota, which at one point was the myrtle capital of the world. So there was bodies literally in the streets, and people would like come by with bodies and just drop it into a pile of bodies outside of his door and leave. And he would just go through these bodies every single day. And I believe this film took several years to complete, because every single day a Japanese, like I said, the Japanese are everywhere here. A Japanese filmmaker by the name of Tsurisaki Kiyotake. Tsurisaki. We're gonna call him Tsurisaki. Tsurisaki followed around Orozco for like a couple years to make this film. And then Orozco died. That was how I believe he died before the film released, but I know that he died. Not sure when. This video is turning into a shit show. Oh my god. Where Faces of Death is by far one of the most famous films in this subgenre of extreme horror, Mondo Kane is by far the pioneer and the most respected film in this subgenre of extreme horror, because Mondo Kane showed you death and death culture from around the world. For example, a lot of it has to do with animals. The one that sticks out to me the most is how this woman who lost her child was breastfeeding a piglet who lost her mom. Like a human was breastfeeding a piglet in Papua New Guinea. That's the kind of shit that's in this movie, but it mostly revolves around an educational standpoint of death as a topic. The next movie is in Portuguese, and it's actually quite a bit of movies. They're called Arquivos da Morte Saga. There's 17 films, and they're the Death Files. What I mean by that is that there were already a bunch of movies called the Death Files, and then a company in Brazil bought the rights to those movies, renamed them Arquivos da Morte, and then they released more movies under the Death Files. But instead of calling themselves the Death Files, they're called Arquivos de Morte, and they're just basically more documentaries about death. And there's 17 of them that I could find existence of. I'm sure that there are way more, but the ones that I found there were 17 of them. Holy fuck. Dude, my throat is going out. I've been recording for 2 hours now. Junk Films is the next name of the film that is in this tier. The reason I say film is because it is a mixture of different short films made by, you guessed it, Tsurisaki Kiyotaka, the same guy who made Orozco the Embalmer. He just loves this type of movie because he keeps fucking making them. It's just a bunch of short films depicting death. Same thing, auto accidents, motorcycle accidents, work accidents, suicide, homicide, things like that. They're just, yeah, that's what junk films are, just a bunch of short horror films, short films of that, put into one, called junk films. Death to Kufar. This one, I believe, is 15 minutes long, and it's nothing but terroristic decapitations and suicide bombings from, like, extremist organizations in the Middle East. And then it ends with a white man or boy. I think he must be a kid, because no one else would make something like this. It's just so cringy. Just a white kid. It matters that he's white. Taking a United States flag and then burning it and then flipping off the camera, and then movie's done. That's the film. And then the last film here is a film called Rare, a Dead Person. Guess who made this one? You fucking guessed it. Tsurisaki Kiyotake. Except this is just more of like a he's a death photographer. Like, he takes pictures of corpses for like documentation and narration purposes. And this film is that. It's just going through all of the different corpses that he has. That's why it's called Rare, a Dead Person. It's pictures of corpses, videos of corpses. Something is fucking going on with Tsurisaki. That's all I'm saying. And now we move on to tier number 7. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something real quick, okay? When I was doing research for this, I couldn't eat after reading this because I hated it so much. So disgusting, so gross. Ew, 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 ew. Why would you make this? Why would you make things like this? Why? The first film in tier number 7 is a film called Vomit, Enema, Ecstasy. 1 and 2. There are 2 of these movies. Enema, for those of you unaware of what that is, it's when you throw liquid into your anus to instill a bowel movement, make you shit. Vomit, enema, ecstasy. Put those 3 words together. You get it. I'm moving on. I don't care. The KT trilogy revolves around 3 different movies called KT602, KT606, and KT610. And they are very hardcore BDSM porn with a very strong emphasis on blood and needle play. The next movie is called Kuso Limitless. And I'm not gonna lie, I couldn't find jack shit on this movie. Like, I dug for a good 30 minutes looking for anything related to Kuso Limitless, Guso Limitless, just in case they misspelled it, but I couldn't find anything. So it wasn't for a lack of trying, it was just a lack of any information on this film that I don't know what this is about. But given what surrounds it, it's probably have something to do with fucking puke or poop. The next oh god, the next films are called Guso Milk 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the oh god, the fucking art for this thing is this lady laying down, and then there's like 5 people around her, and they're shitting milk on her. Milk, bro. Oh god. You want to know what I wish existed? That thing from Men in Black where they go poof, and like your mind gets wiped from the time you were born, and then they just make up a new reality for you. That's what I wish existed, because this is fucked up. But Guso Milk 1 through 4, I'm assuming, is just milk enemas and shitting and just drinking the shit milk. And bro, why? Motel Files and other random cuts. There isn't much information on this one either, but from what little information I could gather from threads on Reddit that I read, it's super heavy BDSM, like super sadomasochistic BDSM with like hints of Satanism and a red filter, and like grindcore heavy metal, death metal, dark metal being played in the background. Again, I'm not sure why grindcore death metal is like being associated with this shit. So no Vaseline, the great porn swindle. How else am I gonna, how do I say this? Poop. Poop. Puke. You get it. Also, it's worth noting that in the background of this, there is industrial noises like heavy machinery, pipes being banged about, just the noises in the background, but very loudly. No, I don't know why. Don't fucking ask me. Why is there poop and puke and pipes in the same... I don't get it. I'm not going to pretend to know why. All I know is I don't fucking like it. UNKB-002. Now, it's very interesting because somebody made a short horror film called UNKB-002. I'm not sure if he understands that there is also another UNKB-002, but if you look up on Google UNKB-002, the short horror film will come up and not what is on the bottom of this fucking tier list, because UNKB-002 is not a horror movie. It's poop. It's a lot. A lot. Like an unfathomable Cthulhu fucking Lovecraftian amount of poop. Like, if you try to imagine how much poop is here, you'd lose your fucking mind. That's how much poop is in UNKB-002. So, Genki Genki 18, 19, and 21. I'm going to say 3 words, and I'm going to move on, because these 3 words are in order: 18, 19, and 21. Fish, eel, and frogs. Yeah, okay. Channel 309, from what I understand, is almost exactly like the Motile Files and other random cuts, in which it being super heavy BDSM, but Channel 309 leans more hardly into the artistic version of it. Not sure how that works, but it's basically Motile Files, but more artsy. Don't get them confused, bud. Squirmfest. We're gonna rush through this one, and I'm trying not to gag here. It's a Japanese movie. Okay, the film opens. Okay, she's eating worms off a plate. Okay, next thing you know, she shits on the floor. Okay, runny, steamy, hot shit on the floor. Okay, she eats it off the floor. Okay, don't know why she did that, but she did. Bunch of other enema fucking disgusting poop shit happens in the movie. Then the final ending. Oh god. Oh, gross. She takes cockroaches, maggots, flies, worms, and her own piss, and she puts it in a blender. Blends it, drinks the whole fucking thing. Movie's over. We're moving on. Saddest Scream 1 through 5. I couldn't find much on it. What I did find were 2 words: fart, poop. I didn't want to dig any further. I don't think any of you blame me. And Red Room 1 and 2 is just kind of like torture porn. Like super, like it's kind of like guinea pig torture porn type shit. But also with like poop, puke, fart, piss, ass. I sound like a 3rd grader just repeating all the swear words that he knows. What is happening to me? Finally, we reach the bottom of the disturbing movie iceberg. Tier number 8. And as you can see on my notes, big sad face. Big sad. The first movie in this tier list is a movie called Fubar, and I have a bone to pick with this particular movie because this Iceberg right here came out 4 years ago in 2020. However, there was another movie released in 2022 titled Fubar, the band movie. Now, why I have a problem with this in general is because that person is just trying to capitalize off of the name Fubar and it being a banned movie. First of all, Fubar is not a banned movie, at least in the United States, it's not banned. Secondly, it's just somebody kind of taking advantage of ignorant people trying, like mostly kids, because if you didn't know, kids see this and they take it as a challenge and they're like, I wonder what this is, nothing is that bad, and then they watch that and get fucking fucked up in the head because they don't contemplate the consequences of their actions. Anyway, some asshole made a film called Fubar in 2022 trying to trick people into thinking that that is the film that is on the bottom of the iceberg. It's not. It's just a fucking asshole that is trying his absolute hardest to be recognized in a space he knows nothing about. So if you see a movie called Fubar, the banned movie made in 2022, that's not the one referenced here. The one referenced here is completely different. That is an imposter and somebody trying to bandwagon himself and success off of something that he didn't do. All he did was steal a name. All right, moving on. First things first, majority of tier 8 is mixtape films. Mixtape films is like when you go onto gore sites, if you take like 20 of those videos and you just throw them into a film, that's a mixtape film. It's just a bunch of violence and death strewn together into one big film. It's called a mixtape film, and that's what majority of these are. Fubar is a mixtape film, but what sets Fubar apart from other mixtape films is that this movie is in high definition. Majority of mixtape films that you see will be in like 720 at the very max, but majority of the time they're in 480p. Fubar is like fucking 2160 4K. Like, it's ridiculous because it's made in the modern era, and a lot of it has to do with the GWOT, the Global War on Terror, which is also why it's called Fubar, because Fubar is a military acronym for fucked up beyond all recognition. Oh my god, fucked up beyond all recognition. Again, I could be reading the wrong thing, but you know what I do know is it's not that fucking 2022 version, you fucking imposter. The second film on tier 8, or I guess you should say series of films, is called MD Pope. MD Pope is an acronym that stands for Most Disturbed Person on Planet Earth. It's very important to know that there are 3 different versions of this movie. MD Pope 1, MD Pope 2, and MD Pope 3. MD Pope 1 is more weird porn, but still has some elements of gore. I'm not sure what's on MD Pope 2. MD Pope 3 is the MD Pope that everyone knows because it is just straight, what the fuck am I watching? Kind of things that are on MD Pope are like zoophilia, bestiality, right? Then there's also things from the Pain Olympics, if you're old enough to remember the Pain Olympics. Specifically, the dude who chopped off his own dick and balls. Like, that's on MD Pope. And also Funky Town Gore. The infamous gore video from Mexico, Funky Town Gore, is on MD Pope 3. They're called the most disturbed person on planet Earth because it's basically like the most fucked up things in the world, like actually. Like, it's not some like some kid who put together these compilations. Like, these are like, yeah, no, these are a collection of by far the most fucked up things that you could find. And it is. That's what MD Pope is. Most disturbed person on planet Earth for a reason, because it's not only gore, there's also weird porn stuff. There's like things like Guso Milk, UNKB shit on here. It's just disturbing shit in general. That's why it's called MD Pope. Imaque Sequa de Cavalo. Portuguese. Don't know what it means. What I do know is that this movie was sponsored by the Brazilian government to be made. It's about AIDS, but why it's down here is because it has bestiality involving a horse, and the horse is doing the Moving on, Snuff R73. Extreme medical gore from the Syrian war. Surgical procedures, people being shot in the fucking head and stuff like that, like, and being brought into the hospital kind of alive, just shaking and stuff. Really disturbing stuff, but it's all like wartime effort, fucking Syrian war gore shit. So, Snuff R73. The Ogrish Collection. So Ogrish was a gore site that existed in the early 2000s. The Ogrish Collection is like a playlist of the most popular videos from Ogrish. Bunch of gore videos. Nothing, if you've spent time watching gore videos, nothing you haven't seen before. But yeah. Registros Fatias 3. From what I understand, this is just a poorly done knockoff of MD Pope. Like how MD Pope is like actually disturbing, Registros Fatias 3 is just a cringy tryhard trying to be MD Pope. Same thing, just a little more like, this makes no sense. We already have this, why would you do it again? That's like this video. Porn gore 1 through 3, from what I understand and what I've done and what I've read, is just very extreme fetishes. Extreme fetishes, including necrophilia. I could be wrong. Like I said, I couldn't find I could barely find anything on these. I even went to like the website where you could supposedly watch it. By the way, all of these are legal to watch in the United States, like I said. But I couldn't find a summary, and I'm not watching them because I have no interest. But yeah, and the last one is Fetish Munchers 1 and 2. It's important to know that there are no CP on here. A lot of people read this and they're like, oh, there's fucking CP on here. No, and there isn't really anybody eating any fetuses either. It's just, I think that's just the name. That's just what they decided to name the movie. It's just weird porn and weird gore, and there's some things of fetuses, but it's not like eating fetuses, you know. It's definitely down here because it deserves to be down here, but the name is just a hardcore name. It's kind of like Infant Annihilator, Dying Fetus, Vomit Forth, just like hardcore band names. Like, they're just names to just sick names. That's all it is. Fetus Munchers is just a sick name. And the last thing here is the MD Pope 1 YouTube trailer. That no longer exists. It was just a trailer of MD Pope on YouTube. That's it. That's all that is. All right. Okay. All right. And that will do it for the disturbing movie Iceberg Volume 2. I hope you all enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it for you, including almost throwing up multiple times, reading and revisiting some of these movies that I haven't visited in over 3 or 4 years because I haven't touched this fucking iceberg in that long. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like content like this where we explore the darker, more mysterious side of the internet as well as film, movies, and horror culture, go ahead and hit subscribe because I'm going to try and release videos at least once a week, possibly more. If you have any suggestions of what I should do in my next video, comment down below. I will always welcome help, and I will always give credit where credit is due. If I use your idea in a video, I will put your name in the description of that video. Other than that, if you got nothing else for me, then I got nothing else for you. Thank you so much for sitting down and watching this ridiculously long fucking video, and I will catch you all in the next one. Bye.